afternoon. My name is Dave Norton from Discovering New England History. We're going to start a new series here. This is going to be on Clara Barton. We're going to go through her life, and it's very important. If you know someone who's a nurse or in nursing right now, this is the show for you to watch. A lot has not been done about Clara Barton in her entire life, so we're going to try to correct that right now with this this show. The more I got involved and interested in this and reading this book, A Woman of Valor, the more I said this is the show everybody's got to hear about. So we'll go to the next slide. Now, Clara Barton, she was born in North Oxford, Massachusetts. That's on the Rhode Island, Massachusetts border, up off, way up top off of 146. There's a picture, actual photograph. And there's her house. It's actually a museum right now. And my wife and I visited that, and we were really pleasantly surprised on how well it was done. And so here begins her story. We'll go to the next slide. Now, North Oxford, Massachusetts, in 1850, that's what the town looked like. They always had a church, unpaved main road, horses and buggies and wagons and whatever, all the different shops there, and that's what it was living in North Oxford, Massachusetts in 1850. We'll go to the next slide. Now, I took this picture here. That's the back of her house in North Oxford. And if you take a look to the left in the picture, you can see this this barn. And back in the day, they had what they call a barn raising, and all the community got together to help everyone else to put a barn together. Now, at this time, Clara was 11 years old, and she had a 10-year-old brother. And he was up on the roof there helping, and he fell off the roof all the way down and landed really hard. They called doctors, and the doctors couldn't hardly even. They finally got him revived, but he was so badly hurt that they declined to do any further medication or further treatment of him. And they told her right then he had no chance to live. Well, she didn't agree with that. And she nursed her brother for 2 years and back to complete health. Unbelievable. She had no formal nursing training, and she did it all on her own. And this was the start of her medical career. She knew she had something here, something to offer society, and this is how she started right here. So we'll go to the next slide. And there's her schoolhouse. She's out there with all the kids. There's your class, one-room schoolhouse, North Oxford. And she was, when she was very young, she was very, very shy. I mean, her folks would have neighbors over for dinner, and she wouldn't say hardly anything, and she was very withdrawn. So finally, I guess one of the neighbors said, "What you should do, Clara, is become a teacher." And of course, she was horrified by that whole thought, a teacher of all things, no. But then she said, "Okay, I'll try it." So she became the head teacher here at this one-room schoolhouse in North Oxford. Now, the problem with this schoolhouse is that the kids, many more boys than women, were very unruly. I mean, they were talking in class, they were leaving their desks, they were going outside, coming back in, they were getting in fights on the yard and everything. But see, she could handle this because when she was growing up, she grew up with all boys, and they treated her just like he was a boy. And okay, she said, "I can handle this." So she got in there, and believe it or not, they respected her, listened to everything she had to say. She corrected them right on the spot, and they had really a great education right there. And we'll go to the next slide. And here's another shot of another one of the schoolhouses in the area. They don't say exactly where it was. This was probably done early If you take a look at this photograph on the upper left corner, you see those two dark silhouettes? Those are two boys. They got up on top of the tree. So you can see what she had to handle. But she did it in this particular class here. And she got over her shyness. So we'll go in the next slide. Now, she really wanted to further her education. And she found out about a place called the Clinton Liberal Institute, which I believe is in Clinton, New York, to further her education. And she pursued writing and languages. And she was very good with penmanship and organizing and writing. And she was really excited to go to school here. And that's where she went to school. We'll go to the next slide. Now, she found out that in Bordentown, New Jersey, there was an opening. They wanted someone to start up what they call a free school. And this was the first free school, actually, in the United States, 1852. One-room schoolhouse. On the left is what it looked like back in the day, and on the right, that's what it looks like today. And of course, that's a great picture of what you can do to save history, which the town did. It made that into a museum instead of just tearing it down and putting a road through it or neglecting it. They always remembered Clara Barton, and that's where it is. You can see they did a beautiful job in restoration. But once again, she started with just one class, but she had a vision. So we'll go to the next slide. And that's the inside of the one-room schoolhouse, which you can visit. And it kept on growing. Word got around, and she had to expand to other locations, and she expanded the school system. Instead of one room, she had 600 students. They all wanted her to teach. She was doing really well, and then the town said, wow, what we need is a superintendent of schools. This thing is so large. But after all that work that she did and put in, they didn't even consider her for that position. They hired a male superintendent. And back then, I guess if you were a woman, they didn't believe you had the skills or anything to do a job that a man was supposed to do. And that, I mean, it really upset her to no end after all the work she did, So she quit there and went on to found something else to do in Washington, D.C. So we'll go to the next slide. Now, the president at the time was James Buchanan. In his administration, he was a Democrat, his administration. And when you're in office, you can appoint all the people in all the different agencies, okay? So 1855, she got a job as a clerk in U.S. Patent Office, and that was almost unheard of. And in federal government, they frowned upon hiring women into any positions in the federal government. But she did very well there, U.S. Patent Office. That's a picture of it on the right. You can see it's, I try to take these pictures back in the day. You can see there's a horse there in the front there, and it's pretty close to what it looked like. And that was under James Buchanan administration. So we'll go to the next slide. Now, she was fired from the U.S. Patent Office. Nothing to do with her performance, just because she was a woman. And Buchanan finally, they changed administrations and everything else, and Buchanan finally decided he didn't want any women in the patent office and let them all go. So she was really, really upset about that and returned to her home in North Oxford, Massachusetts. We'll go to the next slide. Now we had a new administration. Abraham Lincoln was elected president. And he knew all about her and hired her back in the U.S. Patent Office as a copyist. Of course, back then they didn't have any copier machines or anything like that. So if we had documents to copy, you had to do those all by hand. And so she went right back there, and she was excited, and moved to Washington, D.C. in 1861. Now we're getting close to the Civil War. So we'll go to the next slide. Now the Civil War begins. Fort Sumter. And of course the Confederates just completely bombarded the fort. April 13th, 1861, and the country was just completely divided. An interesting thing about Fort Sumter, I've been there, my wife and I have been there, it's a great place to visit. And you have to take a boat to get out there on that island. The thing about it, all this bombardment, whatever, and it's a large stone fort, no one was actually, from the Union, was actually killed during that time. But I found this picture on the right. It was right after the Confederates took over Fort Sumter, and you can see there's the Confederate flag flying at the top. And now the Civil War has begun. And of course, Clara was still in Washington, D.C. So we'll go to the next slide. Lincoln calls for troops. Now, right away, the idea was to volunteer in the military. All you had to do was stay in there for 3 months. We've got to get as many troops as we can all around Washington, D.C., because it's very close to Richmond, which is now the capital of the Confederacy. So the 6th Massachusetts Regiment was formed, and they're all ready to go. Now, these are all young kids, and didn't have much training at all at that point. So they took a train from Massachusetts area. That's the area where Clara lived, up North Oxford and Lowell, that whole area there, where they recruited from. They took a train, Semble took a train all the way down from Massachusetts to Baltimore. Now, they had to change trains because they had to get down to Washington, D.C. So you can see that famous painting there. All the soldiers got out of the train, information marched through downtown Baltimore to pick up a train connection to Washington, D.C. This was on April 19th, 1861, 6 days after Fort Sumter was attacked. And this was amazing to get troops that fast to protect Washington, D.C. We'll go to the next slide. Now, what happened was Maryland didn't know which way to go. Did they go with the federal government, or did they go to the new Confederacy? And they didn't know what to do. So what they had was half of Maryland was Southern sympathizers. And so the 6th Massachusetts was marching through Baltimore, and they got attacked by a huge crowd of Southern sympathizers. 4 of the Union soldiers were killed, and 36 were wounded in this attack. This is actually the first skirmish of the Civil War, called the Baltimore Riot, April 19th, 1861. We'll go to the next slide. One of the soldiers was killed, and he was actually from Lowell, Massachusetts, a fellow by the name of Luther Ladd. And he's on record as being the first soldier killed in the American Civil War. And a lot of folks don't know that, from Lowell, Massachusetts. And you can see down there, I'm not sure what the date was on that, but the whole town had a big memorial service for him, parade and everything else. And the picture on the right, that monument is still there today in Lowell, Massachusetts. And his name is Luther Ladd. And I believe he was only 16 years old. First soldier from Massachusetts. Not from Massachusetts, from the whole country that was killed in the Civil War. So we'll go to the next slide. Now, I tried to find out what was Washington like at the time of the Civil War. And I got this picture of the U.S. Capitol, Washington, D.C. And you can see it wasn't finished. You can see on the top of it, the dome, it's still under construction, and that's what we had to defend against the Confederacy. They were afraid the Confederacy was going to sweep right into Washington, and the war would be over at that time. And that's why they had to get all these recruits and go through all the training. So we'll go to the next slide. Now, I wanted to show you this one here. Even though it shows the, later on, even though it shows the Capitol Dome finished, just to give you an idea of where the Washington Railroad Station is. And there it is on the left. You can see how close it is to the Capitol building. So what they did after the Baltimore riot, they put everyone, the wounded and everybody else on the train, sent them down to Washington, D.C., right here at this railroad station. So we'll go to the next slide. There's a close-up of the station. Clara Barton was working in Washington at the patent office, and word got around it was the 6th Massachusetts Regiment was coming by the train and needed some medical assistance. And that's a great picture of the railroad station. So she left her office, came down the street, and was ready there to greet the train coming in. So we'll go to the next slide. And this picture is great. And it shows the 6th Massachusetts Regiment on the left there. They're treated, they brought them inside the Capitol. And of course, they didn't even have the roof on it. And you can see all the braces and all the structure there, and the sketch on the left. And that's where they treated all the wounded people. And there's a great close-up of the Capitol on the right. So Sarah rushed over there to meet them and see what she can do. So we'll go to the next slide. And this picture I got was tremendous. There's Clara Barton up there, and there's her schoolhouse. Lo and behold, a lot of the soldiers from the 6th Massachusetts, she was their teacher in that little schoolhouse. And I got this picture. It said the 6th Massachusetts soldiers. They don't have any names on there, so I can't tell you exactly if any of those are actually in her class or not. But you can see how young they were. And it's been recently colorized, which really makes it very interesting to take a look at. So we'll go to the next slide. Now, if you go to the Capitol Rotunda today, there's a painting, one of many paintings surrounding that dome there. And I took enlarged it over there on the right, and you can see the Rotunda during the Civil War, and you can see there's a picture of Clara Barton, and there's all the wounded from the Baltimore riot, which is the 6th Massachusetts. And I really wonder how many folks really know that there's an actual painting on the Capitol building of Clara Barton and all those Massachusetts soldiers. It was a great discovery that I had. So we'll go to the next slide. Now we're moving along into July, and of course Washington is getting reinforced. And basically they found out that the Confederates were assembling and going to attack. And now we're talking about Bull Run, which was the first major battle of the Civil War. This was in July 21st, 1861. And of course, Fort Sumter was in April of 1861. And that's an actual picture right there of the battlefield site. We'll go to the next slide. Now, you got to remember that the Union forces, they're all new recruits, all of them. They were basically untrained, really didn't know how to attack in formation. On the other hand, the Confederates, they were well trained. And you can see this painting there. They charged right at the Union Army. First Battle of Bull Run. And we'll go to the next slide. And this painting here, it's amazing. It sort of describes everything about Bull Run. As soon as the Confederates charged en masse, the Union Army breaks ranks and just takes off anywhere, helter-skelter. You can see all the caissons, which had the artillery pieces. The horses were all scared. They all just broke and ran off. All the soldiers just ran in all different directions. And it was a huge victory for the South. And the North thought this was going to be the battle to end the war. With all the soldiers they had in Washington, D.C., and they actually, in the northern side, they actually had a lot of civilians that were actually up on a hill watching the battle, and they thought it was really great. We want to see this, and this is going to be the only battle we'll have a chance to see. And boy, were they disappointed. Big win for the Confederacy. We'll go to the next slide. Now, this actual picture here, Bull Run battlefield, you can see that there's hardly a tree left there. The other side of the bridge. And that's a famous stone bridge. And it's absolutely been battered by artillery. And it was a huge crushing defeat for the Union Army. We'll go to the next slide. Now there's the battlefield. I mean, Clara Barton visits. She left and she went to Bull Run and walked the battlefield. She was really appalled by what she saw. The soldiers were just left to die in the battlefield. They had no medical supplies for the doctors. They had hardly any doctors there. And all the wounded were just left to die if they couldn't walk off the battlefield by themselves. It was just a mess. And she vowed that she could make a difference and she could change all this. That's what the Bull Run experience was very important to her. So we'll go to the next slide. So she started on her own. She volunteered, no money, she set up a medical supply system in she had a large apartment on the 3rd floor. And she wrote to all the newspapers in Massachusetts, send supplies, we need supplies. So they sent from Massachusetts bandages, medicines, food, doctor's instruments, everything. And she stored it in her apartment in Washington, D.C. She said, boy, if there's going to be another attack or anything like that, somebody's got to stand up and figure out how to put all this together to help out. And of course, she had no formal nursing training either. So we'll go to the next slide. But she had a vision to organize what she would hope to be an Army Medical Corps. She had 5 steps here. Step number 1, medical supply system should be set up. Treatment should be prioritized. In other words, it was helter-skelter. They should have the wounded that were in worse shape should be evacuated and handled first, and then others and whatever separated on the battlefield. So the treatment should be prioritized right off the bat. And then the wounded should be quickly evacuated to hospitals. They had no method of doing that. All the nurses should be trained, and the doctor procedures should be standardized. And of course, somewhere on the right there, so a lot of different things that they weren't prepared for. On the top there, you've got they didn't have any soap, they didn't have any medicines, they didn't have anything to on a large scale like that. So that was Clara Barton's vision. So we'll go to the next slide. Now you can see she started putting together medical kits, food supplies, requisitioned, and stockpiled, and it just came in from a lot of the towns in Massachusetts because she had a lot of connections there in Massachusetts. And when she was in Washington, D.C., she met and knew a lot of connections there in Washington, D.C. and she had to do a lot of politicking because they didn't want anything to do with the women in charge of anything like that. So she did this all on her own. And we'll go to the next slide. And here we are now. All these boxes are getting piled up in her apartment. And you can see everything they needed. Hardtack in the photo over on the right there. They needed bandages. They needed soap. And it was all coming in. So she was organizing all of this all by herself, because the federal government really didn't give her any official capacity to do that. And you can see the canteen up there. That's actually a Union canteen. And that's the same as the one I have on my desk. On my wife's side of the family, that canteen right here was given down, and we have it right now. It's an actual Union canteen from the Civil War. So we'll go to the next slide. So you can see how close she was to work. That's her apartment there over on the left, and on the right is the patent office. So she was stockpiling all these goods up there on an empty floor and walking to work, working full time and doing this on the side. So we'll go to the next slide. Now, how do you get all these supplies pouring in? She didn't anticipate it, so she really had a big bar of steel, whatever, to get a covered wagon. And they assigned it to her, and there's a picture of the actual Civil War medical covered wagon. So she had one wagon, and we'll go to the next slide. And got a couple teamsters, and they would go from the train, load it up, go down the street there in Washington, D.C., and unload it in her apartment. So this ends episode 1 of Clara Barton, and it's an important part of history that I'm trying to put together so you can really understand it. And this is the book you really want to read by Stephen B. Oates. He's a professor of history at UMass Amherst, and he did a wonderful job on this book, and I highly recommend it. So this is end of episode 1. This is Dave Norton. Have a good afternoon.